All right, never mind. It said I wasn't using audio. We're going to continue with the axial skeleton bone markings. Ooh-hoo-hoo. All right, when I left you, I was on page 2, dose of the things you need to know on the skeleton. And I had done sutures and 6 processes, just the zygomatic arch, frontal bone, parietal bone, sphenoid, and ethmoid bone. So occipital, temporal, mandible, left to do on the skull, auditory ossicles as well. And then the vertebrae, the ribs, and the sternum, and the sacrum, sorry. This is actually gonna go rather quickly compared to the first video. So, the skull. Occipital bone. On the outside, at the base of the skull, you have this projection right here. This is the external occipital protuberance. Okay, where's my pointer? External occipital protuberance. You know the hypoglossal canal that is formed by the occipital condyles. So we know these two already. Also on the outside, along the arch of this protuberance, you see this minute indentation along the back of the skull. This is called the superior nuchal line. And then also you have a minor one below, and this is the inferior nuchal line. So superior and inferior as well. We know the foramen magnum right here. And on the inside in the occipital bone, you have the condyloid canal running deep in the bone in this posterior region, right after the sphenoid bone here. Scooch in. And so you have one on both sides. Temporal bone, starting on the outside, flipping it over. You have the carotid canal. There's one on both sides. There. You have the styloid process. Remember, it's these tiny projections coming off either side here. You have the mastoid process. Mastoid process here. So here's the styloid. I'm sorry, good Lord. And then scooch on down. The mastoid process is a projection down. So here's the mastoid process here. And one on each side, of course. And there's that styloid process. Okay? You have the stylomastoid foramen, which is right here on either side. You have the external auditory meatus, which is this indentation here on this skull. You have the mandibular fossa. In order to show you the mandibular fossa, I have to kind of remove the jaw. And if this plastic wasn't here to show, I guess, the joint, it's this, the mandibular, it's this is the mandibular process. Okay, I'm gonna put the jaw back. There we go. What's next? Zygomatic arch, cheekbone. I don't care about those 6 things. It says it's the zygomatic arch. Internal auditory meatus, we've already been through these, is this large opening in the back. The jugular foramen are the smaller ones behind that go through here. And then this ridge is the petrous portion of the temporal bone here. The ridge of the end of the sphenoid bone is called the petrous portion of the temporal bone. You'll note on your list that the word bone is missing in that statement, but it's number 10 under temporal bone. The petrous portion is this ridge. So condyloid canal in the occipital bone, and then ridge, this ridge here is the petrous portion of the temporal bone. I'm gonna go to the mandible. Mandible, you got the body of the mandible here. You got the angle here. And then you have the ramus. Whoops. We'll see, especially when we get to the hip bones, the pelvis is what I want to say. That ramus just means projection basically. So like this piece specifically is the ramus, but the whole thing is the ramus here. Mental foramen, we've already discussed, are the holes in the mandible in the front. Coronoid process is this that tucks up beneath the zygomatic arch. You gotta be careful with these because once you get them all jacked up, they don't go back. That projects up into beneath the zygomatic arch. The mandibular notch is this depression right after the process here. So let me show you. So here's the coronoid process, and where my thumb is here is the mandibular arch. Move the thumb, there it is. This is the mandibular condyle, this part of the jaw that hinges up with the mastoid process. All right, get back in your home. Go to the inside. This is going to be kind of weird and hard to do. I'm on the inside of the mandible. So there is this depression here. They want this to be the mandibular foramen. And there's one on each side. They have something called the myohyaloid line, which you can kind of see right here. So this is the myohyaloid line. It actually follows all the way around to this other side as well. This is it, just a small marking there. Then they have the lingula, which exactly where that foramen was, there's a little projection right above it. That's the lingula right here, before the mandibular foramen is this little, or above the mandibular foramen, superior to it is this lingula, and there's one on both sides here. And then finally, the last thing on the skull is the alveolar, let me say it right, alveolar margin, which is basically the ridge that your teeth bind down into, right here. So all of the parts of the skull, the bone markings, have been discussed, and we can finally set York aside. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we can do the auditory ossicles real quick. I just put them on pictures. I just got 2 pictures to show you. So these are the auditory ossicles, and they go in the order from outside to in. They are the malleus, which the word got cut off, incus, and then the stapes. So outside to in. Malleus is hammer, incus is drum. I keep forgetting what stapes is. But here's your external pinnae of the ear and the opening to the ear canal, and here's your internal ear canal. Here's the tympanic membrane. And you see how the malleus is connected to the tympanic membrane. So when auditory signals are sent to your ear, they're mechanical. And they come into the air, they're pushing sound waves is what's happening. And they hit this tympanic membrane, and the membrane vibrates. This vibration travels up the malleus through the incus to the stapes, at which point the stapes is connected to semicircular canals, and they're full of fluid. And at the point where the the stapes and the semicircular canals connect, that mechanical signal, no, it's still mechanical, isn't it? It's just fluids. Well, it's no longer air vibrations, but it becomes, fluid vibrations. And then eventually it becomes electrical. And that's how we hear in a very, very nutshell type of way. We talk about the special senses at the very beginning of the spring semester. All right. Back here. Okay, we're on page 3 now. Page 3. I'm going to look at the ribs and the sternum real quick, and then we're going to go through the vertebral column through the sacrum. That's what we're going to do. Okay. Ribs and the sternum. When it says 7, the first 7 pair of ribs are the vertebrosternal ribs. What this is saying is that the first 7 pairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, connect directly to the sternum. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You see 7 direct connections to the sternum. So those are your vertebral sternal ribs. Then, so they come from the vertebrae and connect to the sternum. You have your 3 pair of vertebrochondral ribs. And what that means is after 7, you see you have 1, 2, 3 more cartilage connections that are bound to the cartilage on top, that it's bound to the cartilage on top, that binds to the 7th cartilage to connect to the sternum. But these 3 actually don't connect directly to the sternum. They're connected at the vertebrae, but not the sternum. And then the last 2 are called our floating ribs. And so they connect at the vertebrae. Oh, sorry, they're called vertebral ribs as well, but there are floating ribs. And it's 2 ribs that come around and have no connection at all in the front. Those are ribs 11 and 12. So the first 10 pairs of ribs connect, and then the last 2 don't connect in the front. Speaking of a rib, here we go. This is a rib. This structure, this is the sternal side of the rib. The vertebral side of the rib is very flat. And it just connects directly to the vertebrae. And no. Let me see something real quick. Yeah, it's going to be this way. Sorry. The sternal side of the rib is very flat, and it connects, directly and flatly. Let's just pick one that it might fit to the cartilage in front. The vertebral side of the rib actually has quite a bit of roughness and protuberances to it. Put my hand out of the way. Focus. Focus. Which you might not be able to see very well. But very quickly, here is the head of the rib. This little, where you can kind of squeeze in, this is the neck. You have the body of the rib, which is, most of it. And then where it curves is called the angle of the rib. Then you have facets and tubercles. You have the chondral facet that binds to the cartilage of the sternum. You have the vertebral facet that binds to the vertebrae of the spine. And you have on this headpiece, the protuberance here is really the only one you need to worry about. There's another one up here, but protuberance. That's it. That's all the markings. Head, the whole thing, neck, body, angle where it curves, facets, and protuberance. And the protuberance doesn't even have a fancy name. That's the rib. Sternum. The easy one is manubrium, is this large section right here. And then you'll see the ridge that cuts it off from the body, and you'll see the ridge that cuts it off from the xiphoid process. Up here at the top of the manubrium, you have your jugular notch, which you can see is an indentation there. That's the jugular notch, and then you have 2 clavicle notches for your collarbones to connect to. That's not on the list, but that I pointed out. And that's the sternum. So let's get to the vertebrae. It's something you already learned and talked about, cervical vertebrae, the neck vertebrae, there's 7 of them. Thoracic vertebrae have 12. Lumbar vertebrae have 5. Sorry. Sacrum is 5 fused bones / vertebrae, and the coccyx is roughly 4 fused vertebrae. You have your 2 cervical vertebrae. Well, you have your cervical vertebrae. We named the first 2 of them. Let me get my ring of vertebrae here. The first one is called Atlas. Okay. Atlas has no body. He ain't got no body. It's really sad. He has no body here. Nothing rests. There's not weight resting on him like here in this thoracic vertebrae that has this base here for something to rest on. He doesn't have that. He does not have a spinous process. You'll see that all the other vertebrae have a spine projecting off of them. Atlas doesn't have that. What he does have is these two flat facets to connect to the occipital condyles of the skull, and he rests on there like that. I might have them upside down. Yeah, I do. He rests on there like this. Oh gosh. And it allows for a pivot. Okay, the rest of the vertebrae are in the way, but that is what happens. You have axis. Here. Axis does kind of have a spine, and he does kind of have a body. But what's projecting up from the body is something called a dens, or the odontoid process. It should make you think of tooth. And what the odontoid process does is it sits in the atlas like this, allowing for it to pivot around that odontoid process. So that's why we can shake our head no. Atlas is why we can shake our head yes. All the other cervical vertebrae, I'm going to get number 5 here. And for no reason, it's the one I'm grabbing. All the other cervical vertebrae have the exact same things. They have a bifid spine, which means it has 2 little tails to it, if you can kind of see that. They have what are known as transverse foramen. Here we go here, and here you go right here. And then they have the body, a very small body, because they're not supporting much weight. They're really just supporting the weight of the head. Let's move on to thoracic. Where am I? Yeah, okay. All right. Here is a thoracic vertebrae. What you're going to note here is the long, slender, downward sloping spine. It does slope downwards. There we go. You have articulating surfaces superior and inferior. And these articulating surfaces, what happens is, so those superior ones will connect to the inferior ones. Why are you not? Where did you come from? Okay. The inferior ones then will connect to the superior ones there. And we do it again there. And you see here, we have now created transverse foramen for nerves to come out of the spinal column here when they articulate together. They also have these facets or demi-facets. You can kind of see these rough areas here for the rib articulation. Ribs articulate along these. Lumbars are bigger. Once again, notice how when the surfaces are articulating together, you get the transverse foramina through them. You get those transverse foramina through them. They have a very short, blunt spine compared to a thoracic spine. And another thing you should note is that in the thoracic vertebrae, these articulating surfaces are very like 90 degrees off of each other. But in the lumbar vertebrae, they're turned inwards towards each other here. And so they're kind of more side to side. And it's got a large body because of all the vertebrae, it's supporting the most weight as well. General features of all vertebrae, spine of some sort. The lamina are these little pieces that are coming off the spine to these articulating surfaces. So here's a lamina and here's a lamina. The transverse processes coming off here and here. Then the pedicle, which is this, it means foot, and it's this part of this round part, the thing rounding or forming, I'm sorry, the foramen is, this is the pedicle here and here. You got the body. I ain't got no body. You have the foramen. This is true for all cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae, everything I'm naming besides atlas and axis. You have those superior and inferior articulating surfaces. And not shown are your intervertebral discs, which would be cartilage in like this if they were there. Vertebrae. Finally, you have the sacrum. The sacrum has lots of interesting features to it. I will show you a picture in a minute because I don't think that this is a very clear model of the sacrum. But you have your superior articulating surface. Well, this is the body. And you have your superior articulating surface here. You have the sacral canal, which no nerves are actually down in here. It's just the end of the vertebral column, so it holds fluid, but no nerves travel down into this space. You have the sacral hiatus, which is a small opening in this model, but bigger in the picture here. This is the sacral hiatus. You have the sacral median crest, which is this projection. So you see it sideways. This is the crest, this edge here that's pointing out. You have the posterior sacral foramen, which this is just the posterior side of the foramen. And so these are the anterior sacral foramen. So just depending on what side of the sacrum you're on, posterior, anterior. You have the auricular surfaces. So auricular pertains to ear. You can't really see them here, but there's very shallow indentations on either side that, I don't know, somebody thought looked like the ear and so named them auricular. On the anterior side, we've already said the anterior foramen. You have the projection here, this ridge that is supporting the body here. It's the sacral promontory, this ridge. And then in between these anterior foramen, you can see these transverse lines here, here, and here as well. Not listed at all on your list, but you have the coccyx as well. If you go back to the posterior side, you see these articulating surfaces right here. So the coccyx just attaches kind of like this, and you see that it's 4 fused bones. It does curve inward actually. In the males, it's curved inward more drastically than in females. The reason for that being it needs to be able to move out of the way for females to give birth. So that is the axial skeleton. Let me show you the pictures of the sacrum, or the picture of the sacrum here. So we're down here at the bottom, obviously, location of sacrum and coccyx. And this is just the articular process. Sorry, so this is the anterior side. There's that promontory right there, your anterior foramina and your transverse lines. And on the posterior side is all the other things. It's the sacral canal, that opening, the hiatus here, the posterior foramina, that auricular surface. You can see a little bit better here and here, how it's more of an indentation. And then that median crest. Is that all the things? That's all the things. Cool. Those are all the bone markings and listed on page 1, 2, and 3 of your things to know in the skeleton for the axial skeleton. And I'll do bone markings for the appendicular skeleton to be posted next week. Thank you.